What does absolute failure taste like, Maddie? Tonight, you get to find out. Violet raised her champagne glass as everyone in the department laughed. To the most spectacular waste of company resources in our division's history, $2 million down the drain. I stood frozen at the entrance to our break room, still holding my laptop bag. The space had been transformed with balloons and a hand-painted banner that read, Project Disaster Party. Someone had even made a cake decorated with what looked like a sinking ship with my face poorly photoshopped onto it. 23 colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years, were either laughing or avoiding eye contact entirely. A few looked uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up. I told everyone this would happen, Violet continued, her voice carrying across the room. Some people just aren't cut out for leadership positions. But hey, at least we all get cake out of your incompetence. My throat tightened as I scanned the room. Even Ethan, who had helped me compile the final presentation data, was chuckling along. The betrayal hit harder than the humiliation. The manufacturing numbers came in this morning, Violet announced, consulting her tablet with theatrical flair. Production is down 62% since implementation. Absolutely disastrous. I've already scheduled a meeting with the executive team to discuss how we recover from Maddie's little experiment. The words hung in the air as she approached me, heels clicking against the tile floor. Would you like to say something to the team? She asked, extending a plastic champagne flute toward me. Perhaps some advice on how not to flush millions down the toilet? I looked at her smug smile, the same one she'd worn for months every time she'd undermined my proposals in meetings. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. No, thank you, I said quietly, turning away. I think I'll pass. Running away? She called after me. That's becoming a pattern. The laughter followed me down the hallway as I walked toward the elevator. My hands trembled, but not from sadness or fear. I checked my watch. Exactly 4:37 p.m. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to thank you for listening to my story. Drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. I'd love to know who's sharing this journey with me today. My name is Madeline Carter, Maddie to everyone except my grandmother, who insisted proper names were gifts not to be diminished. I'd been with the company for 7 years, working my way up from production analyst to senior operations manager through consistent performance and innovative cost-saving measures. I wasn't the loudest voice in meetings, but my results always spoke for themselves. Until Violet arrived. She took over our division 14 months ago when her mentor retired. Despite having zero manufacturing experience, she walked in wearing designer suits and speaking in consultant buzzwords she'd clearly memorized from business books. Within weeks, she'd replaced 3 department heads with her own people and established herself as someone who demanded absolute loyalty. The manufacturing division had been struggling for years. Our facilities used outdated equipment and processes that wasted materials and worker hours. Each product we made was costing us money instead of generating profit, but nobody seemed willing to address the fundamental issues. I spent months researching solutions, often staying until midnight, analyzing efficiency metrics and studying successful implementations at other companies. The solution required a complete overhaul of our production line, a significant upfront investment, but with potential to triple efficiency within 3 months. When I first proposed the changes, Violet immediately shot them down. We can't risk this kind of disruption, she said during a team meeting. Our shareholders expect stability, not experiments. What she didn't say was that any major success not originating from her would threaten her position. She'd built her reputation on small, safe improvements that looked good in weekly reports but did nothing to address our fundamental problems. For 6 weeks, she blocked my attempts to present to upper management. She assigned me to irrelevant projects in different departments. She even tried transferring me to our satellite office 2 hours away. But I persisted, working nights and weekends refining my proposal. I created detailed implementation timelines, risk assessments, and financial projections. Most importantly, I built relationships with production floor workers who knew exactly where the inefficiencies were happening. You need to understand something about Violet, warned Grace, my closest ally in accounting. She doesn't care about fixing problems. She cares about who gets credit for fixing problems. Grace was in her 50s with 3 decades of corporate experience. She'd seen managers like Violet come and go. The only way your project happens is if you can go above her head and she'll never forgive you for that. I knew the risks, but the division was hemorrhaging money. Eventually, through a connection made at a company volunteer event, I secured a 15-minute slot with our CEO, Bennett Reed. When Violet discovered I'd be presenting directly to leadership, she insisted on attending. As your supervisor, I need to provide context, she said with a thin smile. The day of the presentation, she arrived late, interrupting my opening remarks. Before Maddie continues, she said, sliding into a seat beside the CEO, I should mention this proposal hasn't completed our standard vetting process. We typically require 6 months of analysis before considering changes of this magnitude. And yet you've had 6 months of declining profits with no solution proposed, Bennett observed, gesturing for me to continue. I outlined the problems, the solution, and the implementation timeline, including a critical detail. The transition period will initially show reduced productivity for approximately 3 weeks, while workers adapt to the new processes. After that adjustment period, we'll see a rapid improvement curve that will exceed our current output by at least 40%. This was standard in major system changes. Any significant overhaul required an adaptation phase. I'd built this into all my projections and highlighted it in red in the executive summary. 3 weeks of reduced productivity? Violet interjected. That sounds extremely risky. Actually, said Bennett, tapping my report, Maddie has accounted for this in the financial projections. The temporary dip is offset by month 2. He looked around the table. I believe this is exactly the kind of bold thinking we need. Maddie, you have approval. You'll have 6 months to show results. Violet's face remained professional, but I saw her knuckles whiten as she gripped her pen. The implementation began 3 weeks ago. I worked 18-hour days, training production teams and reconfiguring equipment. Problems arose exactly as anticipated. Workers struggled with new procedures, machinery needed adjustments, and output temporarily plummeted. Each day, Violet visited the production floor, clipboard in hand, documenting every issue. She scheduled daily progress updates with various executives, carefully highlighting problems without mentioning these were expected challenges during transition. I'm concerned about these numbers, she would say, pointing to production charts without showing the projected recovery timeline next to them. She was building a narrative of failure, but I stayed focused on implementation. I knew exactly what was happening and exactly when things would change. Yesterday marked day 21 of implementation. The production teams were finally becoming comfortable with the new systems. Early numbers showed the beginning of the upswing, exactly as my plan had predicted. That same morning, Violet sent a company-wide email announcing an urgent team gathering for the afternoon. No context provided. Now, as I walked out of that humiliating party, leaving behind the laughter and mockery, I wasn't defeated. I was counting down. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. What happened in there? I typed back, exactly what needed to happen. Because what Violet didn't know, what she never bothered to understand, was that today marked the end of the transition period. Tomorrow's production numbers would tell a very different story. I drove home to my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and made a cup of tea. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply waited. At precisely 4:37 p.m. the following day, exactly 24 hours after Violet's celebration, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Hello, Madeline Carter speaking, I answered, setting my tea down on the coffee table. Miss Carter, this is June, Mr. Reed's executive assistant. Her voice was crisp and professional. The CEO would like to see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. Can you confirm your availability? My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. Yes, I'll be there. Is there anything specific I should prepare? Just bring yourself and any relevant data from your manufacturing project. That's all I can share at this time. She paused. And Miss Carter? The meeting will include the full executive board. After we disconnected, I sat motionless for several minutes. The full executive board meant this wasn't just a casual check-in. This was everything I had been working toward. I spent the evening preparing, not by creating elaborate presentations or rehearsing speeches, but by gathering the raw production data from the past 3 weeks alongside my original projections. The simplest numbers would tell the most powerful story. Sleep was impossible that night. I kept thinking about the journey that had brought me here. Growing up, my father ran a small furniture workshop where I spent weekends learning how things were made. While other kids played video games, I studied how different wood joints affected durability and production time. Understanding how things work is power, Dad would say. Most folks only see the finished product, but the real magic is in the process. That lesson shaped my entire career approach. When I joined the company after college, I started by learning every aspect of our manufacturing process. I worked overtime to assist on the production floor, absorbing knowledge from veteran employees who'd been building our products for decades. Ethan, who had laughed at yesterday's party, was once my closest ally. We'd spent countless hours troubleshooting machinery issues together. His betrayal stung more than I wanted to admit. "You can't take it personally," he had told me when Violet first arrived and began reshaping the department. "This is just how the game is played." But I never saw it as a game. The company employed over 2,000 people. Efficient production meant job security for families who depended on those paychecks. It wasn't about power plays or promotions. It was about building something that worked. At 7:30 the next morning, I arrived at headquarters wearing my most professional outfit, a navy dress with a structured jacket. No flashy jewelry or distractions. The data would speak for itself. The executive conference room occupied the top floor with windows overlooking the city. As I approached, I could see people already gathering inside. Through the glass walls, I spotted Violet sitting halfway down the massive table, reviewing documents with intense focus. She hadn't noticed me yet. June met me at the door. "They're ready for you," she said with a small smile that revealed nothing. As I entered, 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Bennett Reed sat at the head of the table, with board members flanking both sides. Violet looked up, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm when she saw me. "Maddie, thank you for joining us," Bennett said, gesturing to an empty chair directly across from Violet. "We're discussing the manufacturing implementation." I nodded and took my seat, placing my thin folder on the table. "Violet was just updating us on the current production figures," he continued. "Please proceed, Violet." She cleared her throat and regained her composure. "As I was saying, the numbers confirm what I've been warning about for weeks. Production is down significantly since implementation. Yesterday's figures show a 62% decrease compared to our baseline." She advanced to a slide, showing a dramatic downward trend. "This represents over $300,000 in lost production value in 3 weeks alone. At this rate, the projected annual loss would exceed $4 million. "And your recommendation?" asked Bennett. "Immediate reversal to our previous systems," she said confidently. "We simply can't afford to continue with this failed approach. My team is prepared to begin the transition back, starting tomorrow." Several board members nodded, making notes. Violet caught my eye, a flash of triumph crossing her face. Bennett turned to me. "Maddie, you've been unusually quiet. What's your assessment of the situation?" The room fell silent as everyone turned toward me. This was the moment everything hinged on. "Mr. Reed, board members," I began, opening my folder and removing a single sheet of paper. "What Violet has presented is absolutely accurate data from yesterday. Production was indeed down 62%. Violet's smile widened. "However," I continued, sliding my paper toward Bennett, "this chart shows our projected implementation timeline from the original proposal you approved. If you look at the highlighted section, you'll see that a 60 to 65% production decrease was anticipated during the 3-week adaptation phase." Bennett studied the document, then passed it around the table. "Furthermore," I said, pulling out my phone, "I received the morning production report approximately 40 minutes ago. May I?" Bennett nodded, and I connected my phone to the room's display system. A new chart appeared showing a dramatic upward spike. This morning's figures show a 28% increase from yesterday, bringing us to only 34% below our baseline. By tomorrow, based on current patterns, we'll be at or near our previous productivity levels. By next week, we'll exceed those numbers by approximately 40%. The room remained silent as the implications sank in. An older board member, Gloria Thompson, according to her nameplate, spoke first. "Violet, were you aware of this projected adaptation period?" Violet's face flushed. Of course, but the risks." "The adaptation phase was highlighted in red in the executive summary," I said quietly. "Page 3, paragraph 2. It was also verbally emphasized during the approval presentation." Bennett flipped through his copy of the original proposal. "She's right. The temporary decrease was clearly documented, along with the expected recovery timeline." He looked at Violet. Yet, yesterday you held a department celebration mocking Maddie for what you called a spectacular failure, when the project is actually performing exactly as she predicted. The room's atmosphere shifted noticeably. Several board members exchanged glances. "I believe I'm missing some context," said Gloria, arching an eyebrow. Bennett briefly explained yesterday's event while Violet stared at the table, lips pressed into a thin line. "That seems extraordinarily unprofessional," Gloria remarked. "Let's focus on the project itself," I suggested, not wanting to appear vindictive. "The manufacturing data shows we're entering the acceleration phase right on schedule. By the end of next week, we'll be producing at levels that will save the company approximately $5 million annually compared to our previous methods." For the next hour, we reviewed detailed metrics from each production area. The board asked pointed questions about implementation challenges, team adaptation, and sustainability of the new methods. With each answer, I could feel the mood in the room shifting more in my favor. Violet attempted to interject several times with concerns about hidden costs and pending issues, but each point was refuted by the actual data. Her interruptions grew less frequent as the meeting progressed. "I believe we've seen enough," Bennett finally said, closing his folder. "Maddie, you've delivered exactly what you promised. The board will need to discuss some additional matters privately. But first, I'd like to address the events of yesterday." He turned to Violet. "Organizing a celebration of a colleague's perceived failure demonstrates concerning judgment, especially when that failure was a documented phase in an approved plan. This raises serious questions about your leadership approach." Violet straightened. "With respect, sir, maintaining team morale during difficult transitions falls under my discretion as department head. The gathering was intended as stress relief during a challenging period. The banner reading Project Disaster Party suggests otherwise," I said quietly. Bennett's expression hardened. "Violet, please step outside with June. She'll direct you to a conference room where we'll continue this conversation privately after the board meeting concludes." After she departed, Bennett turned to me. "I apologize for what you experienced. That's not how we conduct ourselves at this company." "Thank you," I said simply. "Now, regarding the manufacturing division," he continued, "the early results are promising enough that the board would like to discuss expansion possibilities. Would you be prepared to give us your thoughts on scaling this implementation to our other production facilities?" For the next 30 minutes, I outlined how the methods could be adapted across different product lines. When the discussion concluded, Bennett asked me to wait in his office until the board finished their private session. As I sat in the CEO's office overlooking the city, I thought about Violet waiting somewhere in the building, perhaps preparing her defense or planning her next move. Despite everything, I felt no satisfaction in her predicament. The project's success was what mattered, that and the validation of months of work. June appeared at the doorway. "Mr. Reed would like to see you in the small conference room." She led me to a room where Bennett waited alone. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair. "The board has made some decisions I'd like to discuss with you." His expression revealed nothing as he pushed a document across the table. "This is a reorganization proposal for the manufacturing division," he explained. "We'd like your input before finalizing it." I scanned the document, my breath catching as I read the proposed new leadership structure. "This would place me as Director of Manufacturing Operations," I said, looking up at him. "With Violet reporting to me." Bennett nodded. "The board believes your vision for manufacturing modernization should be expanded. Violet has strengths in certain administrative areas, but clearly lacks the technical expertise and leadership approach needed for the division's primary functions." "Has she been informed?" I asked. "Not yet. We wanted to ensure you were willing to accept the position first." I stared at the organizational chart, thinking about everything that had transpired. Yesterday, I'd stood humiliated in front of my colleagues. Today, I was being offered leadership of the entire division. "Before I answer," I said carefully, "I'd like to know one thing. Was this decision made because of yesterday's incident or because of the project results?" Bennett considered the question. "Yesterday revealed character. Today's data revealed competence. We need both in leadership positions." I nodded slowly, coming to a decision that would change everything moving forward. "I accept the position," I said, "but I'd like to propose a slight modification to the structure." Bennett raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath. Rather than having Violet report directly to me, which would create immediate tension. I'd like to establish a new innovation and process integration team that she could lead, separate from primary operations, but still contributing to our overall goals. Interesting approach, he said, leaning forward. Why? Why? 2 reasons. First, having her directly report to me would make it nearly impossible for either of us to succeed. The resentment would affect everyone around us. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Second, despite her approach, Violet does have administrative skills that could be valuable if properly directed. Bennett studied me for a long moment. Most people in your position would want her gone or diminished. You're suggesting giving her a pathway to contribute. I want what's best for the company, not what satisfies a personal grudge. He nodded slowly. The board will need to review this modification, but I find it promising. Success isn't just about having good ideas. It's about building effective teams, even with challenging personalities. He extended his hand. Congratulations, Director Carter. As we shook hands, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. 7 years of work had culminated in this moment. I thought about my father and wished he were still alive to see it. There's one more thing, Bennett added. We need to address yesterday's event with your team. How would you like to handle that? And I considered the question carefully. The team had witnessed my humiliation. Now, they needed to understand what actually happened. I'd like to present the production data myself at tomorrow's department meeting. No accusations, no blame, just facts. Consider it done. He made a note on his tablet. June will coordinate the announcement of your promotion after that meeting. Within hours, the restructuring was formalized. My new role would begin officially on Monday, giving me 3 days to prepare. I spent that evening in quiet reflection, thinking about the path forward and how to build a culture of collaborative innovation rather than competitive sabotage. Friday morning arrived with a strange sense of calm. I arrived at work early, reviewing the latest production figures. The numbers had improved even more dramatically overnight. We were now just 12% below our baseline production, with clear indicators the trend would continue upward. At 10 a.m., the entire department gathered in the conference room. I could feel the tension as I walked in. Some colleagues looked away guiltily, while others whispered among themselves. Ethan sat near the back, his expression unreadable. Violet was notably absent. Bennett opened the meeting. Thank you all for coming. I've asked Maddie to present the current status of the manufacturing implementation. I connected my tablet to the display and showed a simple graph with 3 lines: the projected adaptation curve from my original proposal, the actual production data from the past 3 weeks, and the anticipated future trajectory. As you can see, I explained calmly, the temporary reduction in productivity was both expected and planned for. This morning's numbers show we've already begun the recovery phase, with production increasing at a rate that will exceed our previous baseline by early next week. The room remained silent as people processed what they were seeing. In other words, Bennett added, the project is succeeding exactly as Maddie predicted it would. I continued walking them through specific metrics, highlighting improvements already visible in material usage, quality control, and processing time. With each data point, I could sense the atmosphere shifting, confusion giving way to understanding, then to something approaching shame. Does anyone have questions about the implementation or the data? I asked, concluding my presentation. After a brief silence, Ethan raised his hand. How long have you known the production would recover today? Since I designed the implementation plan 6 months ago, I answered simply. The 3-week adaptation period was always part of the projection. His face flushed as the implication became clear. Yesterday's celebration had been premature at best, deliberately misleading at worst. Bennett took over. In light of these developments and Maddie's exceptional leadership, I'm announcing some organizational changes effective Monday. He outlined the new structure with me as Director of Operations and the creation of Violet's new team. Stunned expressions greeted the announcement. Several people turned to congratulate me, their sincerity mixed with visible discomfort about their previous behavior. As the meeting dispersed, Ethan approached me hesitantly. Maddie, I don't know what to say. I should have. We can discuss it later, I interrupted, not ready for that conversation. Right now, I need to prepare for the transition. The weekend passed in a blur of planning and preparation. By Monday morning, My confidence had solidified into clarity about the path forward. I arrived early to set up my new office, not Violet's former corner space, but a centrally located room with glass walls that kept me visibly accessible to the team. At 9 a.m., I convened my first leadership meeting. Department heads filed in, including Violet, who arrived precisely on time, her expression guarded but professional. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "Today marks a new chapter for our division. Before we discuss specific objectives, I want to establish the foundation for how we'll work together." I outlined my vision for collaborative problem-solving and transparent communication, emphasizing that expertise and results would drive decisions, not politics or personalities. "Each of you brings valuable skills to the table," I continued, meeting each person's eyes, including Violet's. "Our success depends on leveraging those strengths effectively." For the next hour, we discussed immediate priorities and assigned key responsibilities. When I announced Violet would lead a comprehensive review of administrative systems to complement our operational improvements, her surprise was visible. "You want me to lead that initiative?" she asked, the first words she'd spoken during the meeting. "You have the strongest background in administrative processes," I said, matter-of-factly. "The role suits your experience." As the meeting concluded, I asked Violet to stay behind. When we were alone, the tension between us was palpable. "Why did you do this?" she asked finally. "You could have had me removed completely." "That wouldn't serve the company's interests," I replied. "Despite our differences, you have skills that can contribute to our success." She studied me, searching for hidden motives. "I don't understand you." "I'm not asking you to understand me," I said quietly. "I'm asking you to respect the work we're here to do. And if I can't accept this arrangement, that's your choice to make. But before you decide, I'd suggest looking at what this restructuring actually offers you, an opportunity to build something successful rather than tear down others' work." She left without another word, and I wondered if she would return the next day. She did. The weeks that followed transformed the division. Production continued its upward trajectory, exceeding my projections by the second month. The atmosphere shifted as people realized their ideas would be evaluated on merit rather than politics. Violet remained distant but professional, gradually building her new team and implementing several administrative improvements that genuinely enhanced our efficiency. We maintained a careful working relationship, never friendly, but increasingly respectful. 3 months after the restructuring, Bennett invited me to present our results to the full board. The numbers told an impressive story: production up 62%, costs down 47%, quality metrics improved across all categories. "The transformation has exceeded even our optimistic projections," I concluded. "At current rates, we'll recoup the initial investment 2 months ahead of schedule, with annual savings approaching $7 million. Gloria Thompson spoke up. "These results are remarkable, but I'm equally impressed by how you've handled the personnel challenges. Creating a role that channels Violet's abilities productively rather than pushing her out demonstrates exceptional leadership judgment." After the presentation, Bennett walked me to the elevator. "The board has approved expanding your methodology to our other manufacturing sites. They're also discussing broader leadership opportunities for you within the company." I nodded, taking in the news. "Thank you for taking a chance on my proposal when it wasn't the safe option." "Leadership isn't about safe options," he replied. "It's about recognizing potential in projects and in people." 6 months to the day after Violet's celebration of my failure, I found myself working late, reviewing implementation plans for our Western facility. A knock at my door interrupted my concentration. Violet stood in the doorway, a folder in hand. "The administrative efficiency report you requested," she said, placing it on my desk. I expected her to leave immediately as usual, but instead, she hesitated. "The quarterly review meeting is tomorrow." "Yes," I confirmed, uncertain where this was heading. "My team has shown measurable improvements in 3 key areas," she said carefully. "I assume that will be reflected in the assessment." "Results speak for themselves," I replied. "Your team's work has been solid." She nodded, then added unexpectedly, "The Western Facility Implementation Plan. There's an issue with the training schedule you might want to address." I raised an eyebrow, and she explained a legitimate timing conflict I had overlooked. It was the first time she had volunteered assistance beyond her direct responsibilities. "Thank you," I said simply. "I'll make that adjustment." As she turned to leave, I realized something had fundamentally changed. My revenge wasn't having her report to me or watching her struggle with a diminished role. It wasn't public humiliation or professional exile. My revenge was building something so undeniably successful that she had no choice but to become part of it or be left behind. In choosing to include rather than exclude her, I had created the one scenario she couldn't effectively fight against, a system where genuine contribution was the only path to recognition. She had spent years mastering office politics and undermining perceived threats. I had rendered those skills obsolete by creating an environment where only real results mattered. The greatest revenge wasn't destruction but transformation, not just of our manufacturing processes, but of our entire workplace culture. Violet would never be my friend or supporter, but she had become something more valuable, a productive contributor to our shared success. As I watched her walk away, I realized I felt no satisfaction in her diminishment, only appreciation for what we were collectively building. The party celebrating my failure had become the catalyst for the greatest success of my career. Sometimes the most effective response to humiliation isn't retaliation but excellence. Not all victories require an opponent's defeat. Some are measured by what you create, rather than what you destroy. If my story resonated with you today, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear in the comments about a time when you turned a professional setback into an unexpected opportunity. Thanks for listening to my journey. Sometimes the path to success looks exactly like failure until the moment everything changes.